Welcome to the Compass for Being Human, where we educate the ego, emotions, and philosophy for men. Most men are not cruel because they want to be. They're cruel because they're fragile. That's an uncomfortable place to start, but it matters because if we misdiagnose the problem, we keep prescribing the wrong solutions. We tell men to be stronger, more confident, more assertive. But what we're often doing is reinforcing the very thing that causes the damage in the first place: ego dependence. So let's talk about ego, not as a buzzword, not as an insult, but as a psychological structure. Ego dependence is what happens when your sense of self relies on constant reinforcement from the outside world. Approval, attention, agreement, respect, admiration. When those things are present, you feel whole. When they disappear, you feel threatened, hollow, or angry. A man with an internally stable identity can tolerate silence, disagreement, and criticism. A man who depends on ego cannot. This is why ego-dependent men are so reactive. They don't experience feedback as information. They experience it as danger. A correction feels like an attack. A boundary feels like rejection. Being wrong feels like humiliation. And once your nervous system treats disagreement as a threat, everything becomes defensive. This is the soil where egocentrism grows. Egocentrism isn't vanity. It's not thinking you're better than everyone else. It's something subtler and more destructive, interpreting reality primarily through how it affects you. When an egocentric man is told, "That hurt me," his instinct isn't curiosity, it's self-protection. "I didn't mean it that way." "You're overreacting." "That's not what I said." Notice what's happening here. The focus isn't on impact, it's on preserving a self-image. His internal narrative takes priority over someone else's lived experience. This isn't always malicious. Often it's developmental. Many men were never taught how to step outside themselves. They learned to perform, compete, assert, not to perspective shift. But egocentrism has consequences. It makes empathy shallow. It turns conversations into courtrooms. It replaces listening with rebuttal. And if ego dependence hardens over time, if the man never learns to tolerate shame, correction, or vulnerability, egocentrism calcifies into narcissism. Narcissism isn't self-love, it's self-defense. A narcissistic structure exists to protect a fragile identity from collapse. That's why narcissistic men struggle with accountability. Fault cannot be integrated, it must be deflected. Blame is externalized, harm is minimized. Critics are reframed as cruel, irrational, or malicious. This isn't strength, it's armor, and armor prevents learning. At the core of all of this is a missing skill, one masculinity rarely teaches directly: self-awareness. Self-awareness isn't self-criticism. It's the ability to notice what you're feeling without immediately obeying it. Most ego-driven men don't observe their emotions. They enact them. Anger becomes aggression. Discomfort becomes defensiveness. Shame becomes hostility. There's no pause, no distance, no reflection. But maturity begins at that pause. The moment you can say, "I feel angry," instead of "I am angry," you've created space. And in that space lives choice. Emotion itself is not the enemy. Emotional illiteracy is. Here's the part that makes people uncomfortable. Men are not less emotional than women. In many cases, they're more reactive. What they lack is emotional vocabulary and regulation. Anger is permitted, vulnerability is not. Fear is shameful. Sadness is weakness. So everything collapses into one blunt expression: aggression, withdrawal, or dominance. This is why emotional literacy is not a soft skill. It's a cognitive upgrade. Emotions are data. They tell you where your boundaries are, what you value, what feels threatened, what needs attention. When you don't understand that data, your decision-making narrows. You lose nuance. You lose foresight. An emotionally illiterate man has fewer behavioral options. Everything becomes fight, silence, or control. Literacy expands freedom, but to become emotionally literate, a man needs an inner monologue that can reflect, not just ruminate. There's a difference. Rumination is repetitive, ego-centered thinking. It loops around justification, resentment, imagined slights. It asks, why am I right? And why are they wrong? Reflection is quieter, slower. It asks, why did that bother me? What part of this is mine to own? What am I afraid of losing right now? Ego hates reflection because reflection threatens identity. Rumination protects it. This is also why many men are obsessed with being right. Being right feels stabilizing when your identity is fragile. Winning arguments becomes a way to reassure yourself that you matter, that you're competent, that you're not weak. But being right is not the same as being good, or useful, or ethical. There are many moments where saying what you think contributes nothing, where correctness causes harm, where restraint is wiser than expression. Ego prioritizes visibility. Character prioritizes impact. This obsession with correctness often pairs with constant external validation seeking. The man doesn't feel solid on his own, so he looks outward for confirmation, praise, sexual attention, admiration, agreement. From the outside, this can look like confidence. From the inside, it's anxiety. And a man who needs validation will trade integrity to get it. He'll laugh at jokes he knows are wrong. He'll stay silent when he should speak. He'll perform masculinity instead of practicing responsibility. This is why accepting being wrong is such a critical developmental threshold. For many men, being wrong doesn't feel like a mistake. It feels like annihilation. Their worth is fused to competence, so errors must be denied, minimized, or reframed. But growth begins when error becomes information rather than threat. A stable identity can survive correction. It doesn't collapse under feedback. It integrates it. This is where responsibility enters, not as punishment, but as self-respect. There's a quiet dignity and reliability in doing what you said you'd do, in being consistent without needing applause. Ego wants attention. Competence wants time. Charisma impresses. Reliability builds trust. And trust in yourself and from others is one of the few things that actually stabilizes identity over the long term. Which brings us to moral courage. Because none of this matters if it stays theoretical. There will be moments where you're surrounded by men making jokes, dismissing women, degrading them casually, normalizing harm through humor. In those moments, ego whispers, don't be awkward. Don't cause tension. Don't be that guy. Integrity asks a harder question. What kind of man am I becoming if I stay silent? Calling out misogyny is not about being morally superior. It's about refusing complicity. Silence is not neutrality, it's permission. And yes, it's uncomfortable. That's the point. Ethics costs something. If it costs you nothing, it's probably just performance. Choosing discomfort over silence is choosing identity over approval. It's choosing internal alignment over external comfort. And that's the through line in all of this. The work is not becoming louder, or tougher, or more dominant. The work is becoming internally anchored. A man who knows who he is doesn't need to defend himself constantly. A man who can observe his emotions doesn't need to obey them. A man who can be wrong without collapsing can actually learn. A man who values responsibility over image becomes trustworthy, including to himself. This isn't about perfection. You will fail. You will revert. You will catch yourself posturing, reacting, avoiding. The difference is what happens next. Do you justify or do you reflect? Do you defend or do you repair? Do you protect your ego or your values? Because ego wants to be seen, character wants to be aligned. And in the long run, alignment is the only thing that holds. Thank you for watching. If this resonated with you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos.